Throughout history, the pattern is unmistakable. When governments and politicians identify one problem and propose one solution, the results are often catastrophic. In this video, we're going to examine why this approach is so dangerous, how it has been used to justify unimaginable cruelty, and why it's crucial that we remain vigilant in recognizing these patterns today. Most importantly, we will explore how this strategy is often a smokescreen, hiding far more sinister intentions. In times of uncertainty, people crave simplicity. It's human nature to want clear answers to complex problems. Politicians exploit this by pointing to a single cause for all our troubles, whether it's an ethnic group, a religion, a political ideology, or an economic class. They go to extremes of even blaming bad weather, hurricanes, droughts, earthquakes, and fires on minorities, while they steal the voice of those minorities to suppress the truth and revelation of their lies and propaganda. This one problem, one solution rhetoric feels comforting because it's easy to understand. But history shows us the dangers of this approach and reveals that such narratives are often distractions from deeper, more sinister motives. Take Nazi Germany in the 1930s. There's reason, in everyone, always going to this time in history. None of those early supporters believed the depths of evil, Hitler, and the conservative Nazi Party was going to take them, until they were knee-deep in blood. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power by blaming Jews as enemies within for Germany's economic woes and social instability. The solution they proposed was the systematic eradication of entire peoples. Many ordinary Germans just thought they would go away, go back to where they came from. The reality is over 6 million Jews, Gypsies, Polish, and people of color were murdered in the Holocaust. Millions of people they deemed undesirable. But while the public was fixated on these enemies, the Nazis consolidated power, crushed dissent, and redirected the nation's resources into a catastrophic war. The scapegoating served as a distraction, enabling their broader, more destructive agenda. The echoes of this are heard today in "We are going to take Panama Canal, Greenland, and Canada." In the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin's regime blamed political dissenters, intellectuals, and the kulaks, relatively affluent peasants, for economic failures and societal discontent. His solution was forced collectivization, purges, and mass executions. Millions died of starvation and in labor camps. Meanwhile, Stalin tightened his grip on power, suppressing any voices that could challenge him. The focus on enemies distracted the public from the regime's own policy failures and atrocities. This reverberates today in the attacks on wealthy liberals like Jimmy Carter and his legacy of inclusion, or Joe Biden and his efforts to promote an environmentally cleaner, more prosperous country. The Rwandan genocide in 1994 provides another grim example. The Hutu-led government blamed the Tutsi minority for the country's problems. Over the course of just 100 days, nearly 1 million people were slaughtered. But this wasn't just about ethnic hatred. It was a calculated move by political elites to maintain power in the face of internal dissent and economic turmoil. Once again, the one problem, one solution narrative served as a deadly distraction. The ghosts of this today are present in proposed mass deportations, rounding up children of immigrants and denying them citizenship, and sending the military to the border to fight a war that does not exist. The phrase, "enemies within," has been used throughout history to justify crackdowns, purges, and authoritarian control. In McCarthy-era America, politicians used fear of communists infiltrating the government and society to justify blacklists, ruined careers, and a culture of paranoia. Senator Joseph McCarthy's infamous witch hunts devastated lives without ever uncovering significant evidence of the threats he claimed. The real goal? Consolidating power and distracting from pressing domestic issues like terrible labor conditions, the polio epidemic, and a world still reeling from the conflicts of World War II. The effects of this distraction echo even today, as we glorify the good old days without reckoning with their hidden injustices. In Nazi Germany, Hitler's rhetoric about enemies within framed Jewish people, political dissidents, and other marginalized groups as saboteurs of the nation. This justification paved the way for systemic atrocities, including the Holocaust, while also masking the regime's economic exploitation and military ambitions. Stalin similarly accused intellectuals, artists, and political opponents of being enemies plotting against the state, using this narrative to obscure his government's failures and maintain absolute control. During Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, the concept of enemies within was weaponized against educators, intellectuals, and even ordinary citizens. The Red Guard's fervor destroyed cultural artifacts, eroded trust within communities, and led to widespread violence. All of this served to distract the population from economic hardships and internal political struggles within the Communist Party. These historical examples depended on undermining the free press or just simply killing or murdering of the voice of dissent in the media of their times. Clearly present today in fake news propaganda about every inconvenient fact, bad outcome, or grim reality that occurs today. Whether it's Russians falling out windows, Arabic journalists being dismembered in embassies, or politically radicalized mobs attacking the integrity of media institutions, their reporters, and most heinously, the families of these people with swatting and threats in their homes of violence and murder. Today, we see echoes of this dangerous rhetoric in how immigrants are often portrayed as the root of economic, cultural, and social issues. Phrases like, "they're taking our jobs," "they're criminals," "they're eating the dogs," or "they're infiltrating our communities," mirror historical scapegoating tactics. But let's be clear, these narratives serve a purpose beyond fear-mongering. They distract from systemic issues like income inequality, corporate exploitation, and the erosion of workers' rights, problems that powerful interests would rather keep out of the spotlight. There's another critical piece to this story: the role of the wealthy and powerful. Throughout history, elites have often supported these final solutions because they believed it would protect their interests. In Nazi Germany, major corporations like Volkswagen and Bayer profited from forced labor and the war machine. Wealthy industrialists like Fritz Thyssen initially funded Hitler's rise, only to find themselves sidelined or imprisoned when the regime's priorities shifted. In the Soviet Union, party elites lived in luxury while millions starved. And today, powerful corporations and political figures often stoke divisions to keep the public distracted while they profit from the status quo. But here's the irony: these elites often don't escape unscathed. When the dictator has what he needs, or the tide turns, they're exposed, disgraced, and even executed. Consider Mussolini's industrial supporters, who were left bankrupt and ruined as his regime collapsed. The very system they supported for personal gain became their undoing. The promise of one solution never delivers. Extremist policies lead to instability, suffering, and often the collapse of the very governments that enforce them. Why? Because the real problems, inequality, corruption, mismanagement, are complex and require nuanced solutions. Blaming everything on one group or one issue is not only morally reprehensible, it's a recipe for failure and often a mask for deeper, more nefarious objectives. If this sounds alarmingly familiar, it's because these tactics are still being used today. Across the world, we see leaders blaming immigrants, specific ideologies, or entire classes of people for economic and social challenges. Recent events, from the border crisis in the US to authoritarian crackdowns in countries like Hungary and Turkey, to global economic unrest, all serve as reminders of how fear and uncertainty are exploited to divide us. The rhetoric may have changed, but the strategy remains the same, and it's up to us to recognize it for what it is: a distraction meant to divide us while larger systemic injustices go unchecked. We can't afford to fall for the same traps again. When a politician tells you there's one problem and one solution, ask questions, demand evidence, look for the nuance, and perhaps most importantly, hold everyone accountable for the cruelty and inhumane results of their words and deeds, regardless of their affiliations. Quick, clever zingers and populist rhetoric may sound appealing, but they must never excuse harm or distract us from demanding meaningful solutions. The world's challenges are complex, but so are we. Together, we can build solutions that embrace diversity, empathy, and understanding. We don't need scapegoats, we need solidarity. And one final thought. If you find yourself nodding along to rhetoric that blames one group or promises an easy fix, take a step back. Double-check yourself. Triple-check yourself. Ask, am I being led astray? Am I the sheep being led to slaughter? Propaganda thrives on unchecked emotion. Take the time to question it, because history shows us how dangerous it is to follow without reflection. And questioning isn't just a political act, it's a deeply human one, rooted in ancient wisdom. The Bible encourages us to prove all things, to study, reflect, and discern between truth and falsehood. This principle, meant to safeguard spiritual integrity, applies equally to the decisions we make in life and society. When something seems too simple, too easy, or too good to be true, it often is. Thank you for watching. If you find this video thought-provoking, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Let's keep the conversation going, because history doesn't have to repeat itself. Please leave comments below. Agree or disagree, your comments are your voice in this gathering dystopian gloom.